Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air, the Muslim Action Hour. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe as we approach the end of the work week. Hopefully all of you will have a great weekend, inshallah. I know I'm looking forward to it. But first, we have a very important program for you today and a very special guest. I'm happy to introduce my co-host and our first guest, Megan Fair, who is our Grants Director and Civil Rights Coordinator at CAIR National. Megan, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing very fair. Thank you very much, Edward. It's great to be here with you all, and I'm really excited for today's program and to get to chat with you as well as our other guests that will be joining us later.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Megan. We appreciate it. And so, let's dive right into the subject. This month, March is Women's History Month. We just finished February, Black History Month. And during that month, we tried to make an effort to highlight African-American leaders in our community and to learn from the legacy of those who've gone in the past, activists of the past, and how their legacies are impacting us today in the present. And so we want to do something similar, as my understanding, Women's History Month, and take it even further. So Megan, can you start by telling us first, Women's History Month? What's the background? How did it come to be?
So Women's History Month really was launched in the 70s and 80s in coordination with the National Alliance of Women's History. This organization had discovered that there was actually a National Women's History Week that was very successful in California. And they realized, why is this only happening in one county in California? We really need to be dedicating a significant amount of time, maybe even more than a week, right? Maybe a month, to celebrating women's contributions to history. And so throughout the 70s and 80s, there was a national campaign that led to the creation of what is now Women's History Month, in large part thanks to the National Alliance of Women's History.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that background. A lot of people don't know those details, perhaps sadly. So we thank you for sharing that with us. So Megan, next, tell us what's in store for CAIR in Women's History Month. We've got so many wonderful female leaders at our national level and across the country, and you all are working on and leading a committee to address this month in a very positive way, not only for CAIR, but for the broader community. Can you tell us what you got in store for us?
That's correct. So we have a really awesome committee that's from all of our chapters. So we're really trying to make this a national campaign across our network. And we're doing 3 different kind of threads throughout the month to really lift up women's voices and the contributions that they've made throughout history. So the first thing that we're doing is we're launching a video campaign called #SheIs. So #SheIsStrong, she is intelligent, she is inspiring, right? And what we're doing is we're asking community members to share the stories of the women that have inspired them. And those can be women throughout history. They can be their mother. They can be women who, maybe we don't know. They're not household names. And the aim of this campaign is really for us to lift up those stories and to tell them. So if you create a 90-second or so video that talks about the women that have influenced you, you can be a man, a woman, you go ahead and share that story. And what we'll do is we'll amplify that throughout the month. We're going to share it on all of our platforms. So we really just want as much community participation as possible in all of that. The other thread that we're going to be doing throughout the month is also going to be talking about the history of women in Islam. We really want to push back on some of the bad stereotypes that we see about the role of women in Islam. And so we're going to be running some various programs, as well as sending out some graphics and telling stories about the significant role that women have played throughout the history of the faith. And then the final thing that we're going to be doing is doing lots of programs that really just lift up the voices of women in various facets of life, whether that's in politics or education or mental health. We really want to make sure that we're telling the stories of the multifaceted ways in which women contribute to society today.
Wonderful. That sounds great, inshallah. We're looking forward to all of that. And I'm glad to hear you say we can record the She Is video for our mother, because I think my mom's going to be happy to hear that, God willing. But also we can do others. I know one of the things we're talking about is maybe doing an event related to Ella Little Collins, who was the sister of Malcolm X. And so that's just one of many, not just women, but Muslim women in America who have made such an important contribution to our nation that needs to be recognized always. So let me ask you this, on that topic, Megan, how representative would you say Women's History Month has been in the past? And how can we make sure that it tells all of the stories of women, not just one race or one area of work like politics? How do we make sure it's representative?
And Edward, I think that's a really important question, and it's kind of a difficult one to answer specifically about Women's History Month, right? Because it's not a unified campaign or one entity. But I do think that what we see happening with Women's History Month historically has been that it generally reflects what's happening in larger society. Those trends where we only hear particular voices, right? We only know of certain names throughout history, and only very specific stories are taught in our history classes. And oftentimes throughout Women's History Month, those are usually predominantly white women, right? And so a good example of that, when we think about the National Alliance of Women's History, the organization that's credited with starting Women's History Month in so many ways, creates a theme every year for the month, right? And so this year's theme is Valiant Women of the Vote, Refusing to be Silenced. And I think that when we talk about the history of the 19th Amendment, that's a good example of how oftentimes we only hear one side of a story, right? We only hear one thread of a really multifaceted, colorful tapestry, right? So oftentimes we'll hear about Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Alice Paul, but we don't hear about, Hallie Quinn Brown, who was the director of the National Association of Colored Women at the time, and had to do a lot post the passage of the 19th Amendment to really, push back on the state laws that were discriminating against women. So when, even at the passage of the 19th Amendment, mainly only white women were able to vote. It wasn't until like the 1950s that Asian American immigrant women had the right to vote. And so when we talk about these things about history, right, we're talking about suffrage and we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, oftentimes we're really just talking about one segment of women and not all of the diversity of women's experiences. And so that's why it's really important that we're intentional in lifting up the voices of those who are often not heard, right? And that's partially why CAIR is really focused on hearing the stories of those who aren't necessarily household names, right? Or hearing the stories of those who we're not necessarily learning about in history. So you had mentioned before Malcolm X's older sister, right? Those are the types of stories that we want to be elevating throughout this month.
Excellent. Sounds good. Inshallah. So Megan, let's continue the conversation now with an additional special guest. I'm going to let you do the honors of introducing her, inshallah.
Thanks so much. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're really excited to have Venus Johnson joining us. There she is. Hi, Venus. So great to see you and have you with us today. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction. So Venus is a junior at Howard University, and she's studying strategic, legal, and management communications with a minor in political science. She's a North San Diego County native that has been cultivating her political aspirations by becoming a full-time campaign organizer and community leader, galvanizing her peers and various youth members to know and understand their civic role in local policies. She has initiated platforms centered around voting. As the project manager of various organizations and coalitions, her most recent endeavor has led her to be the host of the 5th annual North County San Diego Women's March. As a student leader, Venus is committed to elevating the voices of her community and using her voice to inspire, motivate, and ignite change. Thank you so much for joining us today, Venus.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that wonderful bio, and also just for having me. I'm so honored to be in this space and give honor to Women's History Month as well, and to elevate my voice. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Megan, you can take it away with the first question, please.
Oh, sure. So, and I know I read the bio, but I was wondering if there's anything else that we're missing that you'd like to tell us about yourself, your background, and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes, of course. I am a very multifaceted person. In my bio, as you can see, I have been a campaign manager, a political organizer, and a community leader here in North San Diego County. But besides that, I am a student at CAIR. I am a learner of life. I love to learn. And with that, I have always been just a natural learner who takes the knowledge that I gain and try to instill that upon others, try to help galvanize and teach others in any way I can. Definitely this past November election, a main focus of mine was making sure and galvanizing my youth members to understand their importance on voting, and especially in local politics. I feel like traditionally in the educational system, we're always taught, oh, the national election, but we don't understand the value of our local politics, the politics that are happening right in our backyard. So I have this past November, I definitely that was my focus. I focused on making sure my youth, my peers, they knew who's running in their backyards. What does that mean? What are the legislations that are being passed right in their backyard that govern their day-to-day lives? So I am very well-rounded. I am a student. I would consider myself a teacher also in the very bare minimum of ways, but a natural teacher, because I'm always just trying to put myself in position to help bring those after me, bring them up, and help pave the way for them.
Awesome. Awesome. So Venus, again, thank you so much for joining us. So the first thing we want to ask you about the issue at hand is, what does Women's History Month mean to you personally and to your family for that matter?
Yeah, I love that. And before this discussion, I asked myself the same thing, and I giggled at my response, because it was basically, my answer to myself was, Women's History Month is about telling her story instead of his story, history. So I giggled when I told myself that. And it's not just about telling her story, but also empowering women to tell their own stories, and with that being said, me telling my own story as well, elevating my dreams, my goals, and my aspirations, my visions, my commitments. And so, my story would be, I'm committed to ensuring that our youth know about local policy or their civic duties, and just really magnifying my story so that I am a part of history, of course. So that's what Women's History Month means to me. It's elevating her story.
Thanks, Venus. I really like that. Since we've talked a little bit about the history of women and the history of Women's History Month, I think it's important for us to really talk about our trajectory as well. How do you think that we would uplift women of our future?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's important before we talk about women's trajectory, it's also important to note that traditionally women have been history makers since the beginning of humanity, on every level and every way, since the beginning of time. And unfortunately, many achievements of women have been erased or diminished or hidden in our history books and the writings, because they were controlled by men who were writing the histories, So it was always his story, his perspective, his point of view. It was never really a woman's point of view. So with that being said, when we talk about the trajectory of women, we have so many trailblazers in our country right now. So many trailblazers also in our communities and in our own families who are breaking their own glass ceilings. So it's about elevating those stories and really realizing every woman in their own unique way is a part of history. And once we elevate that and find that, it really inspires the women that come after. And I know for me, in the space, in the field that I work in, a lot of times people ask me, how are you so passionate about everything you're doing? Like, what motivates you? How are you able to do the work that you do? And the answer is very simple for me. It's always the ones around me, or who come before me, especially women, primarily women. They are always instilling in me that I have the capability and I will inspire those that come after me. So it's always about inspiring the ones that come after me. I think of it as a relay race. Leadership and women empowerment is basically a relay race. And right now I have the baton, and what am I going to do with it? And once I look at it that way, when I have the baton and I'm running my stretch of the race, I'm making sure that all the young little girls, especially that look like me, and they're in the stands, they're watching me, they know if she can do it, I can do it. And so that's really what it's all about. It's not about, obtaining power and just keeping power, but it's having power to empower, to inspire those that come after you. And once we stay focused on that goal and that vision, then we really can accomplish so much. So, yeah.
So Venus, let me ask you this. How are women in leadership right now, kind of playing a role in paving the way for continued empowerment?
I believe that women right now are doing an amazing job of doing just that. And reason being is they're just fearlessly bold. When we look at Kamala Harris, of course, you know, my Howard sister and our United States Vice President, to be able to be in a position and realize, I know she said, yeah, she's the first, but she's definitely not the last. And when you instill that and when you put that into the space of young women like myself and younger women, then you really put inside of them no barriers. You know, we have such an amazing opportunity here to revolutionize how the next generation of women view entering these spaces. You know, they're realizing that there are no barriers, that there are no hesitations just because I'm a woman. If she can do it, I can do it because I've seen them do it. So it's really just about just that. And making sure that we're empowering young women's confidence and their souls so that we can lead like Stacey Abrams, we can write like Maya Angelou, we can lead and teach like Dr. Jill Biden. You know, we can do all of these things because we're witnessing them do it right in front of our eyes. And so once we're bold enough to step into that power and do the work we're possessed to do, we help eliminate those barriers for the future women.
Thank you, Venus. You know, CAIR is the civil rights and advocacy organization, and we're always looking for opportunities to really call the community to action and to participate in collective change making. And I'm wondering if you have a call to action, what would you be urging our audience to do today?
Yes, I have so many calls to action. I love that question. I have so many calls to action, but I will say specific to this discussion primarily, and given the space of Women's History Month, I would say dedicate every single day of this Women's History Month to one woman in history. And it could be in any space, any field, doesn't matter. It could be sports related, it could be politically related, it could be musically related, art related, whatever it is. Find that one woman each day. And when you find that one woman, you research, you learn about her, you learn about what she went through to get to the glass ceiling that she broke. And when you do that, you're instilling in yourself all the capabilities that she went through. And you're also at the same time empowering yourself to know that you can do the same thing. And so not only are you taking every day of this month to teach yourself about a historic, phenomenal woman, but then you go and what are you going to do with that information? That's really the call to action. You take that information, and whether it's a young woman on the street, a young woman that you meet in a grocery store, if it's your grandchild, your niece, or whatever it is, find that young woman and teach her about what you learned about that historical woman. And so it's not just about taking that information and educating yourself, but it's about I believe that, you know, when you know better, you do better. And that's really what education is, knowing better to do better. So once I know that woman was a trailblazer before me and she did this and that, I can go and instill that into somebody who comes after me and she can move the ball forward. And so now we have a whole lineage of women that know if she can do it, I can do it too.
Yes, God willing. Absolutely. Well, Venus, thank you so much for joining us. We want to ask you before we leave, any other thoughts you want to share? I mean, I think that was a great note to end on, but if you have anything else you want to share, feel free. Otherwise, we really hope you will come back and join us again on the program. God willing, could be this topic or even another topic, maybe some of the things that you're working on, you know, as you continue to advance your goals in your career. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Megan, thank you for co-hosting and joining us today as well. Thank you for the great work you've been doing with CAIR for so many years. Megan is a leader of many hats, which is always valuable in a place like CAIR when we're all overburdened.
Thank you very much, Edward. And just as encouragement, please make sure that you share your She Is videos. We really want to hear your stories. We really want to know about the women who've inspired you, and we want to help to share their stories as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Venus. Thank you, Megan. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, inshallah, God willing, for the next episode of CAIR on Air, the Muslim Action Hour. Until then,